So sorry. I'm just gonna try to hold my breath a little bit. I've been walking and running and out of breath, but here we go. Well, what,
I love
what
it.
up? What up? What up? Oh, I like this shirt. Sorry, no, I don't. The intros is I just be talking and shit. You got to get me going. Anyway, um, what up? Welcome back to the podcast. Just checking in. Of course, I got my co-host here, Qualls, aka Paul, and everybody's favorite uncle, me, Uncle Don Don. Here to just check in as we always do and get into some conversation and see where that goes. So, what's up with you, Paul?
Nothing much. Actually, a really good week. Great intro, by the way. If you did not know by this point, we will keep the majority of that. Just for laughs and giggles, you know. But no, it's been a really good week. It's been a long week, a tiring week, but in a motivating kind of way. I feel like I turned a corner this week. I don't really know how to describe it, but something just felt different about the way I was looking at things and my perspective on a lot of things. So in that regard, it was a really, really good week. So yeah.
Okay.
What about you?
Totally opposite. I mean, my week wasn't terrible, right? But it wasn't great. I didn't have that aha light bulb moment that you just said, like, "Ooh, I'm gonna change my life around." Like, no, I was in dire need to change my life around. Just being like off a routine, out of schedule, just this little thing that we call life. Um, but I got some rest last night. I reset this morning. Well, I started to reset this morning, so I'm going to be feeling as good as you look. Because now I see you got a new look today. You don't have your beanie on, so you surprising everybody with your forehead. It's nice.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I try sometimes. I feel insecure. Used to be insecure about my forehead. That's why I be covering up. Little do people know. But
come
I,
on, show it up. You need to see your thoughts.
that's part of it. I don't know why. I just feel like I don't know. It's a whole thing with my hair, and maybe sometimes when it's pulled back and make it look bigger than what it really is. I don't know. It's a thing I'm getting past. I'm working on it. It's a me thing. It's a me thing. But yeah, the forehead is out. Uh, this isn't a fresh retwist, but it's better than what it's been the last couple times I recorded.
Yeah,
So there's
you got
that.
to tell your secrets.
Exactly. Well, what we
But
talking about today?
I was going to say enough of your forehead and previous traumas. I would love for you to enlighten the folks and tell us what was some of the best advice you've ever gotten. I feel like you a sponge, so you always get
Mm.
advice. What was some of the best advice you've gotten?
Yeah, I do feel like I try to allow a lot to resonate with me. I feel like that's a big part of advice too. Like advice isn't always somebody telling you, "Hey, this is something you should, remember or look out for." Sometimes people are just talking to you or sharing an experience, but there's advice within it. But I think the best piece of advice, I think the best piece of advice I ever gotten, and it's aged really, really well, probably came from my uncle. Um, this was I was had to be 18. I think I had just graduated high school. Or I was about to graduate high school. And of course, in high school, whoever you may or may not be dating at the time, you feel like at the time that's it. At the time
Your word.
yeah, at the time that's your world. That's who you gonna be with. So I don't know what I must have been saying, but I was talking to him about my girlfriend at the time, and I don't remember what exactly I said, but it had to do with like me going off. Like we were, of course, graduating and getting ready to go to different schools. And he essentially, I think I was mentioning something about love, like, oh, I love her and this, that, and the third, or how am I gonna do this if this, that, and the third. And so he was just like, it was one of those moments he like, you don't really know you don't know what love is. Like you care about this person to a degree, but you don't love them. But he said, you'll never know how to truly love somebody um until you love yourself. And I didn't, of course, at the time, I didn't realize all the layers of that. But as time has went on, that is applicable to so many different facets of life, like not just relationships, but it's in friendships, it's in almost every facet that extends from you. Like if you struggle or don't understand how powerful self-love is. So I would say that's probably, at least the advice that I feel like stands out the most, because I feel like I'm constantly going back to that as I navigate different aspects of love, whether it be with brothers, like with bros, whether it be with friends, whether it be with partners, whatever the case may be. I feel like I'm always kind of coming back to how can I genuinely, show this emotion in the best way if I'm not showing it to myself, in the best way or the healthiest way. So show you.
That's interesting. One, I think that is great advice, but no shade to your uncle, but it's funny that people have that conversation around the 17, 18 age where you like transition into adulthood or college or whatever that may be, when it's like 10 years too late. I mean, it's never too late to learn yourself, love yourself, and understand people, but people can know love very early on. Like some of that's going to grow with time and experience. Like I get that, but you can still be understanding that and having emotional intelligence at 10. So by the time you go through these hellscape of relationships in high school that you just think are going to be forever, right? You learn yourself and people at the same time, as opposed to let's just wait until they're 18, throw them to the wolves, and then you need to figure out how to do all of that at the same time. So I looking back on it, I'm like, oh wow, I probably heard the same advice in some other like synonymous term,
Mhm.
but I probably could have started a lot earlier.
That's interesting that you say that, because when do you teach that? And if you teach it earlier, I mean, granted, I'm assuming within parenting, of course, there's a way you can ideally teach the child, or you have a desire to teach the child how to, love themselves. But in terms of, I don't know, like it feels hard to be at, I feel like at the time, like at that 17, 18 range, I feel like there's a concept of self-love, but you also kind of have that first concept of, you've probably experienced your first like actual puppy love by 17, 18. Like, like not trying to disrespect anybody that feel like they middle school relationships was serious. I'm not trying to disrespect nobody.
Yeah, you also were showing up, like chill out.
You know what I'm saying? So, but I don't know how that would get taught earlier. But I don't disagree. I just wonder, I wonder if parents are concerned about the retention of it earlier. And if that's why maybe there in general, there's like, well, maybe at 17, 18, at least there's a better chance of the seed being planted than at 11 or 12, or maybe it just has to be a different lesson. I don't know. But I just think I do think that part is interesting as well.
I mean, that makes sense just because like I said I never wanted to teach elementary school. And I loathed the day that I had to do testing for ninth graders. Like I was just like, this is my personal hell. But at the time I liked the teenage age group because you could talk to them differently. They could understand. They had a little more like awareness of the world in themselves. But you talk about self-love and all of those things, like how do you teach it? Spoiler alert, this is coming from somebody who does not have kids of their own and quite honestly doesn't want them. But you teach it through actions and you talk about self-love by self-esteem, right? Because that's really
Mhm.
all it is. So the more a kid understands themselves, can advocate for themselves, and then say, like, you ask these questions and do whatever in very, very light, age appropriate ways, those building blocks come up to build up to that puppy love, to build up to that first heartbreak, to build up to not really knowing those things, because then you can test it once you get out in the world, as opposed to trying to learn it and test it at the same time. But I mean, it ain't no perfect way to raise a kid. There's no perfect way to go through life. So all of these things are just nuance changes for real. But it's interesting that that was your insight on that. So that's good. That's good advice to have, though.
Yeah, I definitely agree. What about you? What's the best piece of advice that has either stuck with you the most or that you just feel like was the best advice that you've gotten?
I think the best advice that I've gotten again was in passing. And it is something that has been probably 20 years now with me. But a mentor in high school told me, excuse me, to turn contacts into contracts.
Hmm.
And you hear that we would go on these college tours, and he said, "You go out and meet all these people, and da 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 da." Da. Shout out to Target Hope in Chicago. But he said, when you go out there, you know, you putting your best foot forward. This is your personal brand to them. So this is you trying to gain admissions into the school. This is you trying to get a scholarship. This is you trying to get a job. This is you trying to get whatever that is. So use your mouthpiece positively to benefit on the back end. But he was like, yeah, go in and turn contacts into contracts. Contacts being the people that you meet, you know, are in your network, and hope that that then goes into a job or some other kind of to benefit there. So, I mean, that would be in a professional sense, but I've taken that and ran with it for real because that's how I approach people, like turn contacts into contracts. I don't think everybody is going to give me something from our interactions,
Mm.
but it's a certain level of effort and it's a certain level of investment that I have in like getting to know people and being intentional in my approach to them and things like that. So I'm always trying to get that contract. You can have that as a friend, a brother, in relationships and work. Like contracts don't have to be the typical binding written agreement, but turning contacts into contracts. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, that is profound for you to be getting in high school. That that is extremely layered and profound. That yeah, I wish I heard that in high school. I mean, you hear about networking and taking advantage of networking, and even when it comes down to it's about who you know. I think the idea of not being afraid to put yourself out there for opportunities in the future or just to have somebody know of you and know of what you are capable of or what you are doing, it is very key. And I think the earlier people, learn that, the better. Because if there aren't people waiting until the end of high school or college or hell after college to really get that in their head of let me utilize my network, I think people will see a lot of opportunities actually open up, um potentially, earlier than they may have, in their life previously. So yeah, no, that's really sound advice as well.
Yeah, because it's really the advanced version of closed mouths don't get fed. It's,
Basically, yeah.
it's the same thing, but when you think about it, because you hear like, oh, network and go meet these people, and I speak for myself as a teenager, you was like, okay, I have to. But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, but you want a job, you want to make money, you want to do these things, you want to grow. You can't do that by yourself. So closed mouths don't get fed. Let's be intentional in our approach to whatever it is and turn those contacts into contracts and voila.
Voila. That actually made me think though. Do you feel if I asked you what's the best piece of advice that you've given that you
Mm,
feel like has came from you, how would you even how would you even determine if advice that you gave was good? Because I personally feel like you give really good advice. And I feel like I've been told that I give, good advice, but I don't necessarily in my head, I'm not when I'm sharing something, I'm not thinking, ooh, this is good advice. I'm just trying to be helpful, but it still may be really good advice. A lot of times it's advice that I probably need to take myself, so
all
uh
the time.
but would you have something that falls into that category of something you feel like is the best advice you've given?
Got me out here like Kiki Palmer. Nah, you really testing me with stuff. My God. I don't know. And it's funny that I had a feeling that this would be a question to come up, and I was not prepared to answer. And I was like, we're not gonna get there. And surely you put that on me. I really don't know because much like you, I just talk. Like people take it or leave it, but I just talk from my informed perspective. So I don't even know. I can't even think of something that I said, oh, that was good advice. Or somebody came back and was like, I appreciate you telling me that. I mean, excuse my French, but I usually tell people get your shit together. Like that's great advice coming from me. If I do say so myself. And that was really my approach to teaching. Like, okay, what do you want to do? And, okay, get your shit together. You need to pass. You need to get out of my class. You need to do whatever. Um, I don't know the eloquent version of that, but I think the people getting themselves together mentality is like, how can you button yourself up to not be so self-serving or something along the lines there to really move forward. So it's just like, what do you want to do? How can you help you moving forward? So I don't know. What advice have I given you that you was like, this is great?
Mm, that's a great counter question. There's
Yeah.
been a lot of advice. There's been a lot of advice over the years. In so many words, it's probably been trusting myself. To be honest, I feel like a lot of times I would bring things to you out of fear, out of being scared of what people may think, whether it's related to the brand, whether it's related to some personal decision that may influence or have an effect on some of those around me. And I feel like a lot of times you've always reminded me, like, you've thought about this, like, that you've thought about this, but you're psyching yourself out about what you've thought through, to the point where you're hesitating on a decision because you're afraid that people won't like it, and you're not trusting your own decision. In so many words, that isn't verbatim, but I feel like that's probably the advice that has stuck out, because for me it was the affirmation of somebody seeing, okay, like, somebody has seen your personal process of you going through this. Because I know that's been one of my biggest fears, is that people around me or people that I care about think that I haven't thought something through, or that I haven't went through the process of, like, okay, well, what if this happens, or if this happens? Like, I went through all my what ifs, and I got to this point through, like, not, it's not a rash decision. It's not impulsive. Like, I thought this through. So when I got here, the hope is that there's an understanding and a support in me getting to the point of making this decision, because I actually took the time to figure out what would make the most sense for me. And there was definitely a lot of times, and it's not something I'm perfect with now, but there was definitely a lot of times where I would go through that process, and then if it seemed like, the people around me weren't on board with the decision or disagreed, then all of a sudden, everything was just at a halt for me. So I would say that's probably the advice that had stuck with me from you. And you have a lot of different ways that you may have told me that, So, but in essence, that's essentially what it is.
But you know what? That's actually that makes sense. That's on track for you because your uncle gave you a version of that advice some time ago, right? So
Yeah.
he planted that seed and he was like, you're gonna see something else. I said that to you and watered it. You put it to yourself and now you watching it grow. So now the things that you have made sense of that were like prominent for you, they all linked together. So come on, shout out to you. It was giving photosynthesis. Look at me growing. You need on something green.
Photosynthesis is crazy, but it's accurate. It is very accurate. I'll give you that. We've been talking about, like, advice and how that helps throughout life. As we navigate life, like you said, there's no perfect way to go about life. There's really no perfect way to go about doing anything. But in the
Mhm.
midst of all the different type of transitions, major or minor, that we go through in life, what do you feel like helps you keep things in perspective?
It's a two-part for me. One thing is that so I have a tattoo on my calf it's a massive anchor and it says hope anchors the soul. So like what keeps me grounded is hope.
That's the word.
Like I'm always hopeful, even in my worst days. I'm always hopeful. Like something good, something bad can be good, something good can be better, something that's better can be great, right? There's always a level for improvement, right? So I think that keeps me grounded, but then also what helps me keep things in perspective. Shout out to Alice because she always says, this is a simulation. We are on a floating rock and none of this is real. So I don't take too much seriously. I'm a very serious person and focused, and somebody tried to throw discipline on me, not in my vocabulary, but I know I will commit to the things that I want to do. But also don't take life too serious because none of this is real. It could all end tomorrow. I could lose everything tomorrow. Everything can just be ripped out from under me. On the flip side, I could succeed tomorrow. I could do all these great things. But again, it seems so fickle. Like what we are working towards something, hopefully, but
Right.
it's just like it's so many other factors, right? So we literally are on the big ass rock, just floating through space and just bebopping through the world. So I stay in perspective because I don't really take myself too serious. I mean, on and off camera, like I'm laughing, joking, cracking jokes. I probably should stop because sometimes I'm might be a little off and hurt people feelings or whatever. But it's just I have a jovial spirit. So if I'm gonna take things too serious, then coach, take me out the game.
No, that's real. And it resonates because I've been saying this ever since watching Atlanta, but it does feel like a lot of things are simulations. Some of the things happening recently in the last few years is definitely like, yo, this is not a real place. This is nothing nothing happening can be real right now.
They're
Um
they're trying to ban TikTok. They're trying to take books out of schools. They're rewriting how slavery was talked about to say now it was a benefit to Black and African American people. This is Florida. So if you're listening from Florida, I'm sorry. Um, this cannot be real life. You could not have written this.
right.
What Modern Family episode are we living in right now? That's what life is.
Yeah, no, seriously. No, I definitely agree with that. It's interesting. I think that I mean everybody may have their thing that helps them keep things in perspective, but I think at the end of the day, it's really one of two major things that have subcategories. It's either the idea of not taking life too seriously and just, understanding that a lot of this like is out of our control or hell, a lot of it don't feel real. So
Mhm.
really just focus on yourself anyway. I think for me, I've had to remind myself that things have been worse. Like I think that's the way I keep a lot of things in perspective. Like, um, you, it's easy to be in the moment and feel like this is the worst thing that could happen, right? Like in the moment, because of the inconvenience, usually, it feels heavier than what it may actually be. But when you kind of take some time to really take a step back, it's like, I was in a situation that was actually kind of worse than this. I was in a situation where I had no idea where that next dollar was coming from. Like, now I may have to wait a few days till I get paid, but there was a time where I didn't know where that next dollar was coming from. So it's I think that, and although that isn't easy, I think when you get to a point where you can where you cannot be affected by the moment, I think not being affected by the present, it's a balance of not being affected by the present, not letting your past affect your present, not letting your future affect your present, but then also not letting your past or your present affect your future.
And where's the rule book on that? Because I am
It's
confused.
blank. It's blank. There is no rule book.
Real. What are we supposed to do? What plays am I supposed to run with this? You just said a whole lot, and if I put a diagram together, it's a whole lot of strings matching and connecting with nothing solved.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's always going to be a lot to navigate. So within that, trying to worry about how much it is to navigate ain't gonna do nothing for you. So
You
yeah.
know, another thing that keeps, I think, me keeping things in perspective
Mm.
is experiencing rock bottom. Shout out to
Mm.
everybody who has experienced rock bottom. Because if you have experienced rock bottom, although it may be a trauma response, you know that you've experienced worse, or you know what it can be, you know where you don't want to go back to. So, hey, if I live through, what we say, we live through 100% of our worst days.
Mm,
If I have made it past that point, then no, I'm not going to take things too serious at that point because last year was terrible, specifically for me. That's a conversation for another day. But like hitting rock bottom gives you that perspective because I don't believe if you don't experience that or any higher level hardship that you can truly keep things into perspective because at that point you just live like this idealistic lifestyle.
yeah.
uh, not a euphoria, but you just haven't had a whole lot of bad to get through, which is why your uncle probably told you, like, yo, what you doing right now ain't got nothing on the next 5 years.
No, for real. And that is crazy that you said that. I remember in one of my Cali videos, I think I spoke about rock bottom, but the beauty of, like you said, the beauty of rock bottom on top of, giving you that experience is really the experience that it allows for as a in the aftermath. So when you hit rock bottom, literally the only place to go is up. So like rock bottom is an opportunity for you to start over, for lack of a better phrase, because if rock bottom is the worst, if that's the worst of the worst, right? Then everything else is a step, in the right direction. Ideally. So I do think that in some capacity, I'm not wishing it on anybody, but in some capacity, hitting some form of rock bottom is usually more beneficial than it is detrimental, or can be, at least, depending on perspective, you know.
Because put this on a t-shirt and sell it. Rock bottom breeds resiliency.
Mm.
So I say that and be done.
Look, I hear that. And with that being said, I'm wondering, do you have do's and don'ts for us in regards to this perspective and this life thing? Has this conversation brought about anything that you feel like the people need to understand that they should do or that they don't do from your humble, experience and perspective?
Yeah, let's see. Well, how can we get into Donald's do's and don'ts today? Do listen to yourself.
Mm.
Trust your use your gut as the North Star, right? That do that. Um, just a double negative. Don't not get your shit together. Don't just float through life and say, I'll figure it out tomorrow, or I'm gonna do this next time, or I'll do this. Like, don't just give up. Don't ever think that you are counting yourself out because you can always scrape by. Even out of rock bottom, you can scrape by. I was at the bottom and I was like, oh, this is terrible. And then I hit rock bottom and I said, oh, this is it. So yeah, do listen to yourself. Don't give up on yourself. And when you try to be good, sometimes you just might be a little bored. Shout out to the shirt. But that's my do's and don'ts for the day.
What What does that even mean? We can wrap up with this, but I tried to be good, but then I got bored. What exactly were you trying to be good with? And then why did you get bored?
Left up to interpretation, right? So this might apply to you differently, but I mean, sometimes being good is boring. You hear like nice guys finish last.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm a nice guy, but I think I got a little flavor to me, right? So like I'm not bored. I also bore easily. But no, I tried to be good. I tried to follow this path. I tried to do what was expected of me. But there was no variety in that. It was too vanilla. So I got bored. So then I bought this shirt. But, yeah.
No, no, that actually tracks. So it can have multiple insinuations depending on how it applies to your life. But no, all in all, variety, flavor, differences are good. Uniqueness is needed in in the world today. But no, that was a really good check-in, man. I feel like that was a really good check-in on where things are right now, where we at right now, so
For
yeah,
sure. It's good to see you and talk to you.
of course. As always. Well, until next week and until next time, until it is morning time again for Donald, since it is always morning time for Donald. We'll catch y'all next week.